So that's why we're doing this unusually on the Thursday, but just to say that's not our normal pattern. We will be reverting back to doing them on a Monday. Can I just remind people as well to just keep your cameras off and keep your microphones on mute unless you're speaking, and also just to remind you that the session is being recorded so that people can watch it again afterwards. But if you're not happy with that, then just send us a private message. So thank you very much for being here today. So this Statistics Cafe is being organised with our partner, the International Data Alliance for Children on the Moves, known as Idac. So Idac is a cross-sectoral global coalition comprised of governments, international and regional organisations, NGOs, think tanks, academics and civil society. We know that reliable, granular, timely and accessible data and evidence are essential for understanding how migration and forcible displacement affects children and their families, but more importantly, for also helping us to put in place then the policies and programs to meet their needs. So currently there is insufficient data about children on the move, including the very basic information such as their age, their sex, where they've come from. But even less is actually known about where are they actually going, what were the reasons for leaving, whether they're moving with their families or if they're actually travelling alone, what happens to them along the way, and also the vulnerabilities both in their country of origin, also during transit and in their destination. So these really worrying data gaps run counter to the central transformative promise of the 2030 agenda to leave no one behind, as this most vulnerable group with both migrants and children is effectively invisible. So Idac was conceived of as a mechanism to help us address this gap, with the main objective to improve statistics and data on migrant and forcibly displaced children to support evidence-informed policy making that protects and empowers these groups. So we hope that today's Stats Cafe will be able to learn more about the potential for further work in ESCAP region. We're also going to learn about the experience in Thailand, and we're going to hear about how Idac is supporting the implementation of the commitments of the Global Compact on Migration, which recognises the vulnerability of child migrants and the related data demands. So I'm not going to say much more because we've got a great lineup of speakers. So I'm going to hand over to Petra Namias, who's our Chief of Population and Social Statistics section at ESCAP, and she's going to be moderating the session and introducing our great lineup of speakers. So over to you, Petra. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Rachel. And we're very excited to have this Stats Cafe, as it really is an opportunity to advocate for the excellent work that Idac is doing. And we'd like to start off with a presentation by Idac, and that's going to be presented by Australia Lejom, who is the Statistics and Monitoring Specialist at Idac, and is really, I think, the force behind a lot of their work. So Australia, over to you.
Thank you very much, Petra. It's a real pleasure for me to be here, and thank you very much for facilitating Idac's participation in this Stat Cafe series. This is a great opportunity indeed to have an exchange on what we can do together collectively at a regional level in particular in order to improve data on migrant and displaced children. Let me just share with you my screen. Can you acknowledge that you can see it?
Yeah, I see it well. Thanks, Australia.
Great. So thank you to Rachel as well for the great introduction. In this presentation, I'd like to provide the global outlook on data on children on the move, including the estimated numbers of displaced and migrant children in ESCAP countries, the existing data gaps and needs, why we need to address them, and how to do so. And the second objective is to introduce the Idac and its work and the opportunities for partnership and collaboration to improve the data on children on the move. So globally, the population of migrant children is not small. Today, there are 281 million international migrants, and among them are 36 million children living outside country of birth. So that is 1 in 66 children globally. And these children account for 13% of total international migrants, or 1 in 8 children. In ESCAP alone, there are 8 million children living outside their country of birth. This is about 24% of the total the global total of 281 million, and among them are 8 million children. This figure combines refugee and migrant children. That means 1 in 9 migrants in ESCAP countries is a child. This is slightly less than the global average of 1 in 8. And 1 in 164 children in ESCAP are living abroad, as against globally 1 in 66. There are also millions of children living in forced displacement. As of 2020, 6.7 million in ESCAP had been living as a result of conflict and violence, either within their own country as internally displaced children or across borders as refugees and asylum seekers. In ESCAP countries, 1 in 150 children were forcibly displaced. Additionally, there were an estimated 1.5 million children displaced as a consequence of natural disasters. And some of these displacements may last for days, others for weeks, months, or even years. In 2020 alone, there were an estimated 6.7 million new internal displacements, and disasters are a major cause of these new displacements. That's nearly half of the world's new internal displacements, and almost all of them are due to disasters. And top 4 countries include Philippines, Bangladesh, India, and China, which together contribute nearly 80% of new IDPs. At the end of 2020, an estimated 4.4 million child IDPs were found in the ESCAP countries. That's nearly 1/5 of the world's child IDP stock. And among them, 2.9 million are due to conflict and violence. So the population of child IDPs in Afghanistan alone, which was 2.3 million, takes up to more than half of all IDP children in ESCAP region. These are global numbers. Across the globe, there is a general data scarcity of child migration-related data. Children are often overlooked in data collection, and there are considerable uncertainties when it comes to our knowledge about them. Even concerning very basic migration statistics, the number of international migrants in a country, 3 in 10 countries or territories globally do not have age disaggregated migration stock data. In Central and Southern Asia alone, it is 3 in 5, and in Eastern and Southeastern Asia, it is 1 in 5 countries, or 17%. On refugees, 2 in 5 countries with data on refugees do not have information on age, though ESCAP countries do slightly better. 67% have age disaggregated data. And the situation is even worse for conflict-related IDPs. Over 4 in 5 countries do not disaggregate the data by age. And knowledge gaps are even greater when it comes to migrant and refugee children's access to services and education, well-being, and long-term development. So many of these children are missing from the story and live in invisibility. Last November, the Idac came out with an inaugural Data Insight publication, and you see the photo there, presenting 9 key facts about children on the move to spur the international community to take urgent action. It also took an in-depth look at how and why data gaps on these vulnerable children exist, and what Idac, and in partnership with member states and key stakeholders, could offer to help address those gaps. I invite you to read this publication if you have not yet done so. So why data on migrant and displaced children? The rights of all children, including those on the move, are formalized in a number of agendas and conventions. We have the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, setting out the civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights that all children everywhere are entitled to, including migrant and displaced children. The SDG agenda calls for leaving no one behind and includes 37 child-focused SDG indicators, defining the need to protect all children and realize their potential. The two global compacts on migration and refugees also highlight the need to have a child-sensitive approach in relevant work. In the next 2 weeks, we will have the first International Migration Review Forum, which will look at the state of progress of implementation of the objectives of the GCM. At the regional level, we have the ASEAN Declaration on the Rights of Children in the context of migration, which encourages member states to further strengthen the evidence base on children in the context of migration by improving and investing in the collection and analysis of accurate, reliable, comparable data that is disaggregated by sex, age, migration status, and other characteristics. And there is an accompanying regional plan of action on implementing this ASEAN Declaration. Member states made the commitments to upholding these frameworks. It begins with collecting the data in the right way and the right data on these children to understand the unique circumstances of their lives. There are important topics that need specific illumination. For example, unaccompanied children, children traveling without their parents, alone, and exposed to greater risks can be found on all migration routes and for a variety of reasons, but data about them are difficult to come by. Reliable numbers are mostly available for specific regional or local situations, such as apprehensions at the US-Mexico border and for asylum-seeking children in Europe. But what is common among them is the majority of them are boys. It has to do with the perils of the journey. And in Europe alone, almost 9 out of 10 are unaccompanied minors. In the US, 66% are boys. In South Africa, around 70%. Trafficking and smuggling. Among the detected victims of trafficking, about 1/3 are children. The share of boys among detected victims has risen over the years, but girls still outnumber boys 4-3. Same with immigration detention. Although more and more states prohibit detention of children, still too many children are held in immigration detention. And the numbers are difficult to come by. Family reunification, both children separated during journey and those who started alone to join families in destination countries, we have very limited data about them. And integration, how well integrated, do they have access to services, not least the education and access to the basic services. We need to have the data, the right data to understand what their needs are to foster their integration in host communities and societies. Then we have the education, countering xenophobia and discrimination, and also understanding the experiences of children left behind by parents who migrate for work, and to understand what the effect the separation can have for them in their lives and in their development. So how to improve data on children on the move? We have a collective responsibility to address the large gaps on data and statistics among children on the move that are prevalent across the globe. Better quantitative and qualitative data and evidence are urgently needed to protect and empower these children. But these would entail improving foundational statistics and employing innovative approaches in data collection and analysis to understand and monitor stocks and flows, and crucially to capture the short and longer term development outcomes for migrant and displaced children. For the Idac, we believe that the 5 action points that we highlighted in 2018 call to action for better data on children on the move remain valid today. These action points are to disaggregate data by migratory status, age, sex. 2, to cover key issues relating to children affected by migration and displacement. 3, make better use of existing data and share. 4, coordinate data efforts within countries and across borders. And 5, make special efforts to collect and analyze data on children. The Idac will come up with a renewed call to action in about 2 weeks. We would like to launch that just before the IMRF, and we will organize a side event on May 18. Please stand by for further announcements on that to discuss how these 5 action points could help address the pervasive data gaps that we are still grappling with today, 4 years after the adoption of the GCM. So in terms of our work, as mentioned earlier, Idac brings together interested member states, the UN and other international organizations, NGOs, think tanks, and academia to share insights and expertise, to fill the data and knowledge gaps on children on the move, to deliver on global commitments and on child protection and the 2030 Agenda, the 2 global compacts, and the regional frameworks. Idac strives to address critical questions about data on children on the move by connecting the dots, by bringing different types of expertise to the table, by working together to build guidance and frameworks and deliver public services that could end the invisibility of children on the move. So this is just a snapshot of the 3-pronged action plan of Idac from 2022 to 2024. To strengthen the data systems, Idac is working towards producing guidance and tools on child-specific migration and displacement data, indicators, and methods, promoting the implementation of the integrated data ecosystem assessment and strengthening, or IDEAS project, in countries to identify data gaps and needs, improve systems, build country capacity, and bolster data sharing and analysis. This IDEAS project has been conducted in Thailand and Jordan, and specific recommendations were made to improve data systems in these 2 countries. And I believe we will hear from our colleague Hatay Shanok later. Providing other technical support as well as needed through workshops, webinars, and in-country consultations. To promote collaboration and innovation, Idac is providing a platform to exchange information, share good practices and experiences, and promote new and innovative methods in collecting, analyzing, sharing, and using data. Most recently, last April 11, we hosted a webinar to shed light on the available data on Ukrainian children who were affected by the war. And finally, Idac is leveraging numerous platforms such as this Asia-Pacific Stats Café to raise the voices of children on the move and emphasize the vital role of data in protecting their rights. 4 Idac working groups were established in early 2021 to translate Idac objectives into concrete outputs, and these working groups are the vehicles by which Idac is trying to develop public goods, such as the tools and guidance materials. Our operational modality is peer learning and bottoms-up approach to co-developing standards for this data collection, analysis, sharing, and use by sharing the available know-how, methodologies, and relevant networks of the individual Idac members. We are co-creating solutions to strengthen data capacity, to improve child-specific indicators and data, to enhance data availability on internally displaced children, and to promote collaboration to identify innovative methods to child-specific data collection. These working groups are aligning activities with existing statistical expert groups, such as IGRIS and the Expert Group on Migration Statistics. These working groups are open to all interested member states and stakeholders. I'd like to take the opportunity to invite ESCAP countries to contribute to an ongoing initiative led by Working Group 2. In particular, this is an indicator mapping exercise. The objective is to capture information that describe past experiences on how indicators are chosen and aligned to relevant frameworks, as well as the limitations and best practices on data collection. Countries are asked through this mapping exercise if they already collect or plan to collect data for the select indicators and to indicate the disaggregation variables and data availability. Disaggregation variables include sex, age, migratory status, and nationality. Participants and in respondents so far have been the Idac member states, Eurostat member states, and African Union. And I hope that through the facilitation of the ESCAP Secretariat, the ESCAP countries would be interested to take part in this. So what kind of indicators are we talking about? This exercise suggests 22 indicators covering 5 policy fields: stock and flow, health, child protection, education, poverty, and discrimination. The list of key indicators were chosen because 1, they represent the multidimensional nature of migrant and refugee children's well-being, and 2, they are aligned with the SDGs, the international recommendations for refugee statistics, the international recommendations for IDPs, and the UNICEF strategic plan and the OECD indicators of immigrant integration. So just as an example, for education, one of the indicators is the proportion of children and young people in grades 2 or 3, and at the end of primary and at the end of lower secondary, achieving at least a minimum proficiency level in reading and mathematics. On child protection, example indicator is the number of children held in detention due to their legal status during the year. For poverty, share of children living in a household whose equivalent annual income lies below the poverty threshold. And for health, the under 5 mortality rate. And discrimination, the proportion of population reporting having personally felt discriminated against or harassed in the previous 12 months. So what have we seen so far in the initial results? That 1, stock and flow numbers. Regarding unaccompanied children, only 36% of the countries participating reported having data. For child protection, the coverage of the indicators are disaggregated by migratory status is very poor. On education, more than 50% of the countries reported disaggregating by place of birth and or citizenship of the children. Half of the countries report reading and math proficiency levels for migrant children. On health, less than 30% of the countries reported disaggregating by migratory status, and no more than half reported having age disaggregated health indicators. And finally, on discrimination and poverty, 33% of the OECD countries in our sample reported having the poverty indicator with disaggregation by migratory status. And in general, European country respondents usually have better data coverage than countries from other continents. To promote regional balance and more representative outcomes, this mapping exercise would benefit greatly from the participation of ESCAP countries. So that's one of the many activities that the Idac is trying to promote this year and beyond. We believe that if we pool our resources and time together, we can create a bigger impact and widen our reach. But here are other activities that will benefit from the participation of ESCAP member states and relevant partners in the region. We are drafting a manual on strengthening capacity for collecting data on children on the move. This is led by Working Group 1. We will produce Idac thematic publications and organize webinars in the course of 2022. And some of the topics that have been suggested previously are good practices in data collection, analysis, sharing, and utilization, child-specific indicators on migration and displacement, the impact of climate change, unaccompanied and separated children, and children left behind. Future Idac webinars may look at children and their migratory journeys through the Americas, data disaggregation and capacity building tools, and other topics. Idac will also organize a first annual conference in the last quarter of 2022. And we are continuing to leverage key international events. Last February, we organized a side event on the margins of the UN Statistical Commission. As mentioned earlier, on May 18, we will hold another side event to the IMRF. And we will also try to organize a parallel session at the 3rd International Forum on Migration Statistics, which is taking place in Chile in January 2023. So I'll end with this slide. inviting the ESCAP countries to join the alliance. There are widespread data gaps on children on the move, yet no one size fits all. And we need to learn from the actual experiences and data challenges of individual member states in different parts of the world. As you can see on the screen, of our overview of the Idac membership comprised now of some 45 entities, including 19 member states, represented by NSOs and line ministries, international and regional organizations, NGOs, think tanks, academia and civil society organizations working at the nexus of migration, displacement, development, children and data issues. We have a joint secretariat that helps coordinate and run Idac activities and monitor progress, and the advisory board provides strategic guidance to the group. As mentioned, Petra is our advisory board chair, and we benefit from her advice very much, and are grateful for that. While most geographical regions are represented, we need to bring more member states into the Idac community. In Asia and the Pacific, we currently have only 2 countries, Nepal and Thailand, and we thank them both for their active participation in the alliance. I'm particularly glad, again, that we will hear from Thailand about their initiative in improving child-specific migration data. Dear colleagues, we have much to learn from each other. Asia Pacific hosts 2/3 of the world's migrant population. In addition, the region has seen some of the worst climate-related events causing massive displacement in recent years. So there is a lot of national and regional experiences that we can leverage to improve the data on children on the move. I thus hope that you will consider joining the Idac and contribute to the technical work that we are doing today to promote better outcomes for migrant and displaced children. So thank you very much, and look forward to addressing some of the questions that you may have later. Thank you. Over to you, Petra.
Thank you so much for that overview, Australia. And just to say that if you do have any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat. We should have time for questions and answers after the presentations. So for our next presentation, we'll hear from a country perspective, the work that's been ongoing in Thailand. And I'd like to welcome Hatachanok Chinapawat, who is Director of the Statistical Forecasting Division at the National Statistical Office of Thailand. Thank you.
Thank you, Greta, and good morning and good afternoon to everyone here. And first of all, I would like to thank the organizer Idac and ESCAP to give an opportunity to Thailand to be part of Asia Pacific Stat Café series today. And then I would like to let you know that, okay, next slide, please. I have allowed 4 topics to give you an information related to Thailand. Next, please. I would like to let you know the data sources related to migration in Thailand. There are 2 types of them, as you know. The first one are the administrative data, such as the civil registration, foreign workers registration, social insurance record, immigration registration, and other, for example, health, education, social, and human security. And the second sources are the census and sample surveys data, such as population and housing census, labor force survey, national working student survey, migration survey mix, and also we have information employment survey. Next, please. And the statistic related to migrant and displacement person in Thailand. We also have the number of migrants from the migration survey and percentage of population migrant within 5 years, and population growth rate from the population and housing census, and the migration data from the multiple indicator cluster survey or mix. And we have number of moving in and out of the house registration from official statistics from the registration system, and then number of traveling in and out classified by nationality and type of visa from immigration Bureau from Royal Thai Police, and then we have the displacement data from Ministry of Interior. This slide shows the figure of the migration in Thailand. 68.15 million people is the population in Thailand, and 1.5% is immigrant. 0.03 million moving from abroad, and 1.02 million moving within country. There are top 5 countries within the most immigration to Thailand. 34.1% of immigrants moving from abroad are Myanmar, and 29.5% from Malaysia, and from Cambodia is 10%, 4.6% from United States, and 2.6% from Laos PDRs. For my opinion, we can use both the data, the statistical data, and make better use of administrative data on migrant and displaced children in national data system. Thailand has a relative advanced data and statistical ecosystem, but our decentralized hampers data sharing and integration and have result in data fragmentation. Government agency collecting and harboring data relating to their work. Data on migrant and forcibly displaced children come from variety sources, such as population census, migrant survey, and labor force survey, as well as administrative records from various departments across different ministries. Some instant duplication of work mean that no agency has a complete coverage of the entire population of migrant and displaced persons and their children. It can be seen that will be duplicate data of or lack of data which may not meet the policymaker or national indicator according to national strategy, master plan, as well as international indicator. Closing such data gaps or building a good national data system. In addition to Thailand has a national statistical system master plan. The NSO acts as the secretariat on it. We already have second NSS master plan and coming up with the third national NSS master plan in 2023. But we have not yet succeeded in organizing the national data system, which is the standardized and exchange. Next slide, please. This shows that in 2019, IDEA was implemented with cooperation from IDEA teams, Thai NSO, and related line ministries. The project aims to provide support to improve Thailand data ecosystems. The assessment process first started with a need assessment. Thai NSO organized a national consultative meeting, collaborates with more than 20 relevant line ministries and department, academy, institutes, and NGO. The second process was using assessment toolkit consisting of questionnaires that was customized to Thailand context. Then IDEA's team interviewed relevant line ministries and departments to gain and insight information to identify issues. The third process was an analysis by IDEA team. The main finding show that Thailand has relative advanced data and statistical ecosystem, but our decentralized hampers data sharing and integration and has result in data fragmentation. Data on migrant and forcibly displaced children come from a variety of sources, and they are trapped on migration, statelessness, and displacement data from population census and surveys. The finding we found from the IDEA assessment makes us more aware of migration data issues, including children who are the most vulnerable persons. The recommendation getting from the assessment provide us more practical idea of migration data and statistics development. In response, Thailand has since developed the data government framework for make use Data Catalog, a system for identifying and centrally managing digitization data sources and metadata. The NSO collect their data from 20 ministries dealing with international migration and children on the move. Data are being collected into a NSS management that allow the government to identify gaps, assign appropriate agency to produce official statistics and make improvement to the quality of official statistics. This work is also enabling data to be assessed, used to share across government agencies. These foundation measures are paving the way toward a more comprehensive and coherent data system that prioritize the needs of Thailand's most vulnerable groups, including children on the move. The next slide, please. We have also the IDEA organized meeting on April, September, and then December in 2019. Next slide, please. And next, please. Okay, this is as I mentioned before, that in 2020, the government planned to be a smart government by developing the government data service framework, consists of 5 components, as you see in the in the left side. The government data catalog or GD catalog platform have 3 components. The first one we call agency data catalog. Agency data catalog, or we have more than 200 government agencies and including 76 local provinces. They have to develop their own data catalog. There are 4 types of data in GD catalog or government data catalog. We have the open data or statistical data, and then second, individual data or personal data. Third, we have the security data, and fourth, confidential data. And then the 2 second components, GD catalog, registration and management. Thailand NSO has been developed the government data catalog platform for collecting the list of data and metadata from all agency data catalog. And the third component, GD catalog service, NSO together with the other agency developed the central platform from government data catalog and directory service. From the 3 components, we have data catalog for all utilized such as data exchange, data analytics, open data, and sandbox. And for the site relevant initiative and good practice that promote the inclusion of data on migrant and displacement children in national data system. I think Thailand, we will start with supporting the organization in Thailand to join the government data catalog and NSO who acts as a secretariat in NSS. We will coordinate with the related agency to improve the quality of data or try to close the gap. Next slide, please. For the critical challenge in national data system, there are many challenges in national data system related to the data system. The first one, decentralized data system are fragmented data. Data of international migration and children on the move are scattered and fragmented. Second, lack of proper disaggregate in the data collection process. And third, limited data sharing and integration. It means sharing and integration of non-anonymized microdata remain limited due to data privacy and protection concern. And fourth, lack of common definition and method to define migration and displacement term or indicators. And then law and regulation in Thailand. Each agency has their own law to produce a data and statistic and may not share to other agencies by law. And then the budget constraint, technology including the new data source and knowledge and innovation exchange among government agencies. No coordination agency on migration data and statistics. Each agency has its has its own responsibility and accountability to collect, analysis, and utilize data on migration and displacement. And we have the limited availability of real-time data. Last, discrepancies in the statistics of refugee and asylum seeker. This is related to Thailand not being a part to the 1951 Refugee Convention. Therefore, not recognizing the status of refugee and asylum seeker. Refugees are considered immigrants and are subject to immigration laws. For the last slide, next, yes, thank you. Thailand Project, Thailand Pilot, the Integration Data Ecosystem Assessment and Strengthening Our Ideals project in 2019 to improve inter-agency coordination on data system strengthening. This project aims to map out existing data source, data collection, analysis, sharing, identify good practice, recommendation, and also for Thailand necessary for the development of national statistics on international migration and displacement. The only remaining component needed is the integration of data from various sources. However, the development of progress indicator from migration and displacement, education, healthcare, social protection, and social justice disaggregate by migratory status, and then require more in-depth work because require change in definitions or categorization for international migrants from the basics Thai versus non-Thai categorization to the advanced categorization of migrant, refugee, stateless persons, and internally displaced persons, and change in data collection. This would require awareness raising to enhance agency, close collaboration, and capacity building to ensure data consistency and data standard and quality. In the absence of a designed state agency to comprehensive oversee international migration and displacement, administrations, the Thailand NSO, whose mainly function is to collect, compile, and release official statistics, is ideally placed to take on the role to coordinate the exchange of data and the production of statistics on migration and displacement in Thailand. This is all my presentation. Actually, I would like to invite all the members of the ESCAP country to join the ideal project from the Idac. Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that presentation. And it was, I think, ideas was a great experience being able to work on that in Thailand. And it's a shame that COVID seems to have slowed down the pilots, but now that I think things are opening up again, we hope to be able to implement ideas in other countries and to learn from those experiences. So thank you so much for bringing that up. I'd like to now pass on to my colleague here at ESCAP, Sabine Henning, who is Chief of the Sustainable Demographic Transition Section in Social Development Division. And she's been leading the regional work on the Global Compact on Migration. So I'd like to hand over to you now, Sabine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Petra, and thank you to Rachel and colleagues for inviting the Social Development Division from ESCAP to present a bit on the regional experience. I will be talking about the regional reviews on the Global Compact, but also reflect on what member states said, for example, in relation to children. So since that's the focus of our discussion today, I will also point that out. So a very nice good afternoon to all of you, and I'm very pleased to provide you first an overview of the levels and trends in migration Asia Pacific. So let me share my presentation with you. Okay. I hope you can see that. So the number of immigrants actually in the region grew from 52 million in 1990 to 67 million in 2020, as you can see on the left. And the current number, 67 million, represents about a quarter of the total international migrant stock in the world. There are significant variations by sub-region, as you can see. For example, only 0.5% of the total population, East and Northeast Asia, are migrants. There are variations, but sub-region. But overall, the numbers currently stands for Asia Pacific at 67 million. By gender, it's about 50-50. That varies a little bit by sub-region, but overall, it's almost a balanced a split between males and females in terms of the migrant stock. At the same time, and now I'm referring to the slide on the right, 109 million people from the region lived outside their country of birth. And this represents about 39% of the world's migrants. And as you can see, the number have been increasing. It's interesting to note, however, that about 70% of the migrants outside their country of birth are actually living in other countries of Asia and the Pacific. As we know, there is quite a big number of migrants from Asia Pacific also residing in the Middle East. These are primarily labor migrants, so they also have to be, of course, taken into consideration in these statistics. The next slide shows the age breakdown of the migrant stock, and what we are showing here is number one is age pyramid for the total population, and then on top of this we have the age pyramid for the migrant population. And the migrant population is these harsher lines. And as you can see there, clearly migrants in the region are concentrated in the prime working age, about 77% or about 52 million of the international migrants in the region are in the age bracket 15 to 64. This is data as of 2020, compared to 67% for the total population. However, as you can see also here, there is a considerable number and also share of the total population, of the migrant population, that belongs to the younger age groups. And we already heard some of the numbers earlier, with boys in general representing 52% compared to girls. When talking about international migration Asia Pacific, we also need to recognize that besides labor migration, I already hinted at that, there are also a significant number of people forced to cross borders due to disasters, armed conflict, or persecution. And these are data taken from the Asia Pacific Migration Report 2020, which came out right before our regional review, with thanks to all the good colleagues in the Regional UN Network on Migration. And in this particular chapter, we reflected on the composition, for example, of the refugee flows by top 4 Asia Pacific countries of asylum. And as you clearly see, for example, in Turkey and Pakistan being the primary countries there of asylum in the region, there is a considerable number of children that belong to these age groups. And if you then reflect on the right on the composition of the refugees in countries of origin, you see again that a considerable number of these refugees are children. And in addition to that, we also need to recognize that about 4.5 million internally displaced people are in the region. And again, many of them are children. Now, let me come to the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration. In 2018, member states adopted the GCM, as we call it for short, at a conference in Marrakesh. And this comes after many years of discussing international migration in different venues, but finally elevating it to the level of the General Assembly, in which the member states adopted this global document, which focuses on the collective commitment to improve cooperation on international migration. The Global Compact has 10 cross-cutting and interdependent guiding principles, and for example, child sensitivity is one of them. There are also 23 objectives, addressing all aspects of international migration and defining more of a roadmap of action. So what can member states do to address certain aspects, challenges, opportunities of international migration? There are a few of these objectives that are very relevant to children. Let me just highlight some. For example, Objective 1, and we already heard that. Objective 1 of the GCM talks about the collection and utilization of accurate disaggregated data as a basis for evidence-based policymaking. So this is a very important objective in the Global Compact. Let me also say that when we discuss the Global Compact, we always talk about the Global Compact being rooted in the 2030 Agenda. And we know that a similar objective is in the 2030 Agenda. So these objectives go hand in hand and complement each other. And that goes also with some of the others. I just wanted to say that right from the beginning. Objective 4, for example, of the Global Compact talks about legal identity, which is so important for children. And so there's another one of these objectives that closely aligns also with similar goals in the 2030 Agenda. Objective 7 talks about the vulnerabilities in migration, especially for children, and about protecting children from these vulnerabilities. Objective 15 talks about access to services for migrants, including to education for migrant children and youth. So these are just a few of the objectives in the Global Compact that make specific reference to children. As we say in conclusion, migration should never be an act of desperation, and this is actually guiding the work that we are doing now at the regional level and have done and supported at the national level in terms of, working with member states to ensure that the GCM is implemented and that the migration is safe, orderly, and regular. Now, let us focus on what happened here last year, which was the regional review of the Global Compact for Migration Asia Pacific. The mandate for holding this review goes back to the General Assembly. And in fact, in the respective resolutions, the regional commissions, among others, were tasked or were mandated to organize these regional reviews. And here we in Asia Pacific worked very closely with the regional UN network on migration throughout the whole process. And I will show you, it was a process. It was not just an intergovernmental meeting. It started over a year prior, leading up then and finally concluding with the intergovernmental meeting. It was important, and we followed this, that it was a state-led process and that we applied a whole of government and whole of society approach. So stakeholder consultation, where we also discussed issues concerning children, were an important element. And of course, the meeting itself was through intergovernmental measures. We took stock, we identified challenges, but we also discussed regional priorities and formulated key findings. There is a chair summary, a report, and a chair summary coming out of this, or that came out of this meeting, that is guiding our work, taking it forward. So as I said below, the IGM itself took place from the 10th to the 12th of March. We had a number of member states, over 30 participating, 44 distinct stakeholder groups. There was a survey launched of member states, and we had about 50% of member states responding to it. 5 very comprehensive and inclusive stakeholder consultations. The Asia Pacific Migration Report came out right before it, which is this report that brought all the evidence together on migration in Asia Pacific. It was setting a baseline, and I again want to give credit to the UN colleagues who worked very closely together on the different aspects of the GCM. We really tried to assess GCM objectives by cluster of objectives for all of Asia Pacific, including North and Central Asia. So it's a really valuable resource, and I would strongly encourage you to review that report. Then, as I said, there was the outcome document with a report of the meeting and a chair summary, and of course, the regional network that supported us throughout this process. This is just showing you the timeline. As I said, we started in early 2020. The meeting itself was held in 2021. And just pointing out, there was this Asia Pacific Migration Report, which came out on International Migrant Day 2020, right before the meeting. And then actually currently now, in preparation for the IMRF, ESCAP has looked at all these input documents and all the output that came out of it, and has now written it up in a further report that looks at the analysis of what was said. And this is will be coming out right before the International Migration Review Forum, which will take place later this month in New York, which is a global review. So the regional reviews will feed into the global reviews. Now, So just with regard to the children and also data, what did countries say? And this is just a summary of, some of the evidence we found in the survey that, as I said, 23 member states completed. And this is about data, but it's also about the situation of children in general. I just want to highlight, for example, a project or program launched in Kazakhstan to protect migrant children and offer comprehensive social, psychological, and legal assistance to them, and it was done in collaboration with UNICEF. Something that might be of particular interest to this group is something that happened in Turkmenistan. In 2020, the Law on Civil Status Act went into effect, ensuring that children born in the country, regardless of their migration status of their parents, were registered. So very important for legal identity issues. There are many other examples. Many of these, as you can see in the slide, refer to education. I will just, quickly look through this. Japan, for example, developed curricula and teaching guidelines to strengthen the education for foreign children and promote school attendance. So if you look at the surveys, and they're all posted on our website, you will find these examples and much more, just giving you a glimpse of what was discussed at the meeting. I also want to point out that we have a stateless young person attending the meeting and giving a presentation. So we really try to recognize the importance of this topic at this regional meeting. So what is next for us? Number one is for ESCAP and also the other regional commissions. We are organizing a side event at the IMRF, which tries to bring together all the regional experience and talks about accelerating GCM implementation at the national and regional levels. So this is interesting because it brings together regional commissions from Latin America, from Africa, also from Western Asia, and then Asia and the Pacific. We're also, of course, working with ESCAP member states, and this is also concerning the UN Network on Migration, in particular the champion countries. There are some GCM champion countries that have stepped forward and that are leading in GCM implementation. We are working with them individually, but also as a group through the regional network, to bring the messages of the GCM further, advance them, but also accelerate implementation. And then at ESCAP, again, we have currently a project on migration statistics, especially with a focus on North and Central Asia. So there we will, continue to work on the data aspects. And then I want to look ahead a little bit. I mean, number one is, of course, we're already thinking about, the next regional review, which will come in the next 4 or 5 years. So there will be another opportunity for all of you and, working all on the good data to present these facts and findings to the next regional review of the GCM in Asia Pacific. But we don't need to go so far. But in fact, next year already, we will be organizing the 7th Asia Pacific Population Conference, and migration will be one of the topics. So there's another place, and actually a much closer place for all of us to discuss migration. And of course, when we discuss migration data, there's always opportunity to review on it in terms of the 2030 agenda. The HLPF and also the APFSD and Asia Pacific give us opportunities to discuss migration and data and the situation of children on a regular basis. And with that, I would like to conclude. And this is a website for the meeting that is still features many interesting documents and presentations. And I invite you all to consult this page. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that overview, Sabine. And of course, we have the GCM, which is guiding the work of Idac, but also the Global Compact on Refugees as well. And there was a Stats Café last year on specifically on refugee statistics, which looked at this. We do have a few minutes for questions. I can see that we had a little discussion in the chat already. Chow from UNHCR mentioned about which estimates were being used, and Australia has responded. But I think one point, perhaps, Chow, is also that the work of Idac is also to improve the input data. So you can have this need for modeling is generally because the data itself is poor. So you have to model the numbers. So hopefully, if we can improve the input data, then that by itself will improve the models. We did get a question earlier. I don't see any more questions in the chat, but just to raise one which was sent to us earlier during the registration, And maybe perhaps Australia, you'd like to take this. And it was like, the question was, how do you know that there's a gap? What tools have you used to assess that gap?
Thank you, Petra. Yes. Okay. So, well, as you said, just following up on the last point you mentioned, it's really working with estimates. So the main references are the available data from the UN Population Division. UNICEF is working with UNHCR in coming up with estimates on refugee children, and on international migrant children, it's the UNPDs. So we don't have information that's specific to many countries that are disaggregated, and that's why we know that these data gaps exist. But you have to create some estimates and using certain assumptions. And this is why we highlight the importance of addressing this problem, because it's almost sailing half blind in that sense. To be candid about that, but we have to work with a baseline that will inform policy and program decisions. So this is why improving the foundational statistics is really, really very important. And this is where the work of NSOs and other members of the national data ecosystem would be critical. We have to exchange information, learn from good practices like what Thailand has shared, consider implementing tools like the IDEAS project, for example, subject, of course, to availability of resources, etc., and always being mindful of the global and regional frameworks, the mandates that we have to deliver to improve the outcomes for children. Over, Petra.
Thank you so much, Australia. I don't see any more questions in the chat, and we have also reached the end of our time. So I think all that remains is for me to thank the speakers for such interesting presentations. All the presentations will be made available on our website. And I'd also like to remind our participants that we will have our next Stats Café on the 9th of May, so this Monday, Unlocking the Value of Data for All, and it'll be held from 2 to 3 p.m. Bangkok time. So we look forward to seeing you at our next Stats Café as well. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Petra.
much, Petra
Thank
and
you very
colleagues.
much.
Please reach out after the cafe. Thank you.
Thank you.